You cannot say Catholic priest without someone thinking pedophile. There's no other occupation on earth that has such a connection to pedophilia.
The Vatican has always been full of mystery, with its deep history and influence stretching back centuries. Yet behind all the holy rituals and traditions, there are a few secrets the Church would probably prefer to keep quiet. From shady papal decisions to hidden agendas, the Vatican has played a bigger role in history than most realize. Join us as we reveal 15 secrets the Vatican doesn't want you to know. Number 15. Vatican Bank Scandals. The Vatican Bank should be the most ethical and holy bank in the world, if those concepts can even coexist. Yet instead, the bank became infamous for a string of controversies. Despite its holy affiliations, this financial institution has seen its name marred by corruption, scandals, and mismanagement spanning several decades. The Vatican Bank, officially the Institute for the Works of Religion, has been steeped in drama ever since it launched in 1942. Created during the chaotic days of World War II to slip around Allied financial restrictions, this institution quickly became legendary for its secretive and exclusive dealings. Thanks to its immunity from wartime financial scrutiny, the Vatican Bank gained a reputation as the ultimate offshore haven, attracting clients eager for privacy and mystery. By the 1970s, however, the bank's name became tied to some eyebrow-raising deals, including a $900 million money laundering scandal involving counterfeit bonds and securities. One of the key players was Archbishop Paul Marinus, who doubled as the Vatican's chief security officer and head of the bank. Marinus became notorious for his involvement in the downfall of Michele Sindona, who was an infamous Italian banker. As Sindona's financial empire collapsed, he lost $30 million of his assets, too. Yet this was only the start of the bank's troubles. The collapse of Banco Ambrosiano was perhaps the biggest scandal of all. The Vatican Bank had handed out $1.4 billion in unsecured loans tied to Banco Ambrosiano, leading to a settlement in which the Vatican paid $244 million without admitting any fault. In 2009, an Italian journalist's tell-all book painted a shocking picture of corruption at the bank, including accounts allegedly set up to funnel money through fake charities, embezzlement schemes, and mafia ties. And if that wasn't enough, in 2012, 4 priests were linked to mafia operations, and just a year later, another priest faced arrest for allegedly helping organized crime move millions through Vatican channels. Despite multiple legal brushes, the Vatican often seemed to prefer paying fines over risking a full-on clash with criminal groups. After Pope Benedict XVI's surprising resignation in February 2013, the Catholic Church was thrown into a rush to find a new leader. His papacy had been dominated by headlines about child abuse scandals, and the Vatican's finances weren't exactly in the clear either. Enter Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina, who became Pope Francis I, making history as the first non-European pope in over 1,200 years. Born in Buenos Aires in 1936, Pope Francis quickly became known for his efforts to modernize the Church and restore its image. Number 14. Vatican's secret alliance with the Nazis. In the chaotic aftermath of World War II, former Nazi officials faced capture across Europe, unless they had connections in the right places. Surprisingly, both the Vatican and the Red Cross were rumored to have helped notorious Nazis slip away. The Red Cross has admitted that its aid efforts for refugees were exploited by the Nazis due to overwhelmed administrators. However, new research shows that the scale of this exploitation was far greater than previously believed. Harvard researcher Gerald Steinacher uncovered thousands of leaked documents from the International Committee of the Red Cross, showing how figures like Adolf Eichmann, Josef Mengele, and Klaus Barbie avoided justice with aid from Vatican references and military checks. The Red Cross issued documents called 10 to 100s for these fugitives, helping roughly 120,000 former Nazis escape, with nearly 90% fleeing through Italy. The Vatican's Refugee Commission also played a major role, allegedly providing false identities to Nazi fugitives. Even as evidence mounted, the Vatican held firm, refusing to comment or release its secret archives. Steinacher thinks the Vatican's help was motivated by a hope to revive European Christianity and a fear of the Soviet Union. But here's where things get really messy. Through the Vatican Refugee Commission, war criminals were actually given false identities. While the Vatican believed they were mainly helping innocent refugees, records show that Red Cross teams in Genoa, Rome, and Geneva knew Nazis were slipping through the cracks. Former members of the Schutzstaffel often mingled with real refugees, claiming to be stateless ethnic Germans just to get their hands on transit papers. And it gets worse. Sometimes, Jews trying to reach Palestine via Italy were smuggled over the border, along with fleeing Nazis. Number 13. Complicity in the Rwandan Genocide. In 2017, Pope Francis formally apologized for the Catholic Church's involvement in Rwanda's 1994 genocide. Pope Francis said he hoped that this humble recognition of the failings of that period, which unfortunately disfigured the face of the Church, may contribute to a purification of memory and help restore renewed trust. Many, however, felt that a mere apology was not enough, given the depth of the atrocities. Not to mention, the Vatican only apologized because the Rwandan government had made several requests to the Church to do so. Even the government believed that the Pope's words were mere lip service. During that horrifying period from April to July 1994, Catholic clergy members faced accusations of enabling the slaughter of the Tutsi ethnic group. Survivors and officials reported that thousands of Rwandans seeking safety in churches ended up killed within those supposed sanctuaries. During wars, churches are known to be the safe place. After all, who would unleash violence in a holy place? Yet many Catholic clergy and nuns betrayed the trust of the people they were supposed to protect. While some priests and nuns hid people in churches and convents, others shockingly sided with the perpetrators. One notorious case involved Father Athanasi Saromba, who ordered bulldozers to demolish his church, which resulted in the loss of lives of the 2,000 Tutsis inside. Sisters Gertrude and Maria were also implicated, accused of guiding militia groups to convents where women and children hid. Both Saromba and the sisters were later prosecuted for their actions. The Church's role in the genocide remains a haunting scar, raising painful questions about moral responsibility. Beyond individual cases, reports emerged that some clergy refused to shelter Tutsis or even handed them over to militias. The horrifying accounts of churches becoming massacre sites contributed to a sharp decline in Rwandans' trust in the Church. Now, you know why Rwanda saw a massive rise in the Pentecostal churches in the country. As per the natives, the surviving Catholic clergy still refuses to accept their complicity in the genocide. Many maintain that the Church, as an institution, wasn't involved, but locals believe otherwise. Number 12. The Vaticans Exorcist Network. If you've ever heard about people acting possessed or talking in strange voices, you might be surprised to learn that the Catholic Church still has a team ready to help, its exclusive squad of exorcists. This specialized group of priests, recognized and trained by the Vatican, practices the ancient ritual of exorcism, a ceremony dating back centuries. Though exorcism might seem like a relic from medieval days or something out of a horror movie, the practice has actually seen a big comeback since the 1990s, especially after the establishment of the International Association of Exorcists. This group boasts over 400 exorcists in Italy alone, with hundreds of thousands of exorcism requests rolling in annually. The late Father Gabriele Amorth, one of the Vatican's most famous exorcists, claimed to have handled around 130,000 exorcisms in his lifetime. Believe it or not, any man of faith can become a Vatican-trained exorcist. You just have to pass the course given by the Church. In 2018, as many as 250 priests from 50 countries arrived in Rome to learn how to identify demonic possession. They also came to hear personal stories from other priests and to gain insight into the rituals involved in expelling demons. This week-long Vatican course was the only international series of lectures of its kind. It was called Exorcism and the Prayer of Liberation and had been running since 2005. Since its launch, the number of priests attending has more than doubled. The event cost $370 and covered the theological, psychological, and anthropological aspects of exorcisms. Catholic priests in several countries had reported to the press that there was an increase in people coming forward with signs of demonic possession. In 2017, Pope Francis told priests that they must not hesitate to refer parishioners to exorcists if they were dealing with genuine spiritual disturbances. And well, that statement alone was enough for priests to go back to their traditional way of fighting demons. Yet, like everything else in the world, this practice has become modern too. You can even get an exorcism on FaceTime, believe it or not. By 2018, 90-year-old Cardinal Ernest Simoni was reportedly conducting up to 5 exorcisms a day over the phone, and Bob Larson, founder of the International School of Exorcism, brought exorcism into the digital age, offering sessions via Skype. The Vatican now officially supports exorcism as part of its spiritual duties, expanding its network to meet the demand and training priests who are interested in this terrifying method. They also collaborate with medical professionals to ensure they're not mistaking mental illness for possession. Even in the United States, requests for exorcisms have risen, and well, according to the experts, we might be watching a lot of horror shows. Number 11. The Vatican's hidden courtroom. Way back in 1179, Pope Alexander III set up an ultra-secret tribunal called the Apostolic Penitentiary, which had flown under the radar for more than 8 centuries, only coming to public light in 2009. This tribunal isn't your everyday confession booth. It deals with the most severe sins that even top bishops can't forgive. Only the Pope himself can make that call. Local priests hear mundane moral transgressions all the time, from a husband confessing to cheating on his wife to someone breaking their vow of purity. Yet when it comes to sins and possible crimes like mass murder, genocide, or priests fulfilling their sexual indulgences, the Pope has to be involved. These are some serious sins, and if one requires any sort of absolution, the Pope would want to hear their account directly. Even then, the head of the Vatican can't just forgive the perpetrators. He'd take the matters behind closed doors and discuss them with his close associates to come up with a decision. Sounds a lot, right? Well, it turns out that even cold-hearted criminals can itch for God's forgiveness. This secret apostolic penitentiary was opened to the public in 2009, and only the Pope knows the extent of the horror he has heard so far. Number 10. Vatican Secret Archives. Did Jesus have a wife and descendants? Does the Vatican have exclusive information on the Illuminati? Does the Holy Grail exist? A lot of questions, but not enough answers, right? Well, maybe there are a lot of answers available. They are just hidden in the deepest pits of the Vatican's secret archives, away from the public eye. With over 53 miles of shelf space, the Vatican Secret Archives house documents spanning over 1,000 years. Despite the name, their existence is no real secret. It's the access that's restricted. Only a select few scholars, after a rigorous vetting process, are allowed to dive into these records. Stories have swirled for years, suggesting the archives might shake the foundation of Christianity, and when that happens, the Vatican would never recover. Since 463 AD, these archives have been inherited by each pope, and documents aren't made public until 75 years after their creation. This delay has kept files on sensitive issues. It is rumored that the archive contains files on 2 very big controversies: how Pope Pius aided the Nazis, and heaps of proof that Catholic clergy has abused young boys. In 2019, the name was changed to the Vatican Apostolic Archives, but the secrecy surrounding these legendary vaults remains as strong as ever. Number 9. Popes who chose to step down. Being the Pope might sound like a lifelong gig, but in the last 1,000 years, only 5 popes have chosen to walk away from the job. The first to step down was Benedict IX, who was elected in his early 20s and served 3 tumultuous terms. He bailed on the position in 1036, came back, left again in 1045 when his attempt at marriage fell through, and then was kicked out for good in 1047. Gregory VI resigned under pressure in 1946. Celestine V quit in 1294, fearing he was too inexperienced, only to be jailed by his successor until his death. Gregory XII, facing church chaos, stepped aside in 1415 to unite the church. The latest was Pope Benedict XVI in 2013, citing health concerns, though rumors hinted at internal church disputes. The Pope's resignation came like a wrecking ball to the Catholic community. The last time we saw a pope stepping down was in 1415, which was over 600 years ago. It was true that Pope Benedict was old for the behemoth of the tasks he had to do. But whistleblowers revealed that he was betrayed by his own butler, Paolo Gabriele. While the duo had a father-son-like relationship, Gabriele was tired of the horrors his boss had buried in the Vatican. So, he went public with documents that were not meant for the public eye. Although the Pope later pardoned Gabriele, the issues at hand had already become public. Apparently, the Vatican had a major gay priest problem, which became a decisive factor for Pope Benedict to leave his position. He knew that to cover up the series of abuse by the clergy, the Vatican Bank had settled lawsuits using donor money, which, in a mundane world, would be a jail-worthy crime. To avoid the heat that would have come up with the scandal, Benedict took a hard decision. Number 8. The Vatican's love affair with wine. If the idea of drinking as a sin held up, Vatican City would be in big trouble. Vatican City residents drink more wine per capita than any other place on Earth, clocking in at about 74 liters a person each year. This is more than double the consumption rates in Italy or France, and about 6 times that of the United States. Why so much? Well, the population here skews older, educated, and mostly male, and communal dining is common. Plus, with wine being used in religious ceremonies, there's always plenty to go around. However, that's just one side of the story. Believe it or not, Vatican City actually has its own supermarket, casually referred to as Spaccio della Nonna, a nickname that playfully hints at smuggling. With ultra-low tax rates, shopping here feels a lot like stepping into an exclusive duty-free zone. Those lucky enough to have a Vatican pass can access deals similar to what you'd find on the secured side of an airport. So, is the Holy See secretly the ultimate duty-free shopping spot? It definitely seems like it. Allegedly, this market of sorts is stocked with some of the most luxurious wines in the world. Even when world leaders visit the Vatican, they want a taste of it, so the annual consumption of wine at the Vatican automatically increases. Not to mention, in recent times, the Pope and clergy have been friendly towards the idea of wining and dining. Not too long ago, Pope Francis had expressed his love for wine, even calling it a gift from God. The Pope loves to drink wine, and well, that could be the only thing common between us and him. Despite the hefty responsibilities on his shoulders, he can't miss a tasty glass of wine after an honest man's work. Number 7. Pope Benedict XVI's controversial Nazi past. Pope Benedict, originally Joseph Ratzinger, found himself in hot water due to his conscription into the German anti-aircraft corps during World War II in 1943, while he was still in seminary. This brief stint with the Hitler Youth cast a shadow over his papal election in 2005. Photos from the time show him in uniform at a factory where forced laborers worked. After he deserted in 1945, he spent time in a prisoners of war camp. Yet the reports suggest that the Pope's family was actually quite sympathetic to the Jews and were largely forced to take part in Hitler's evil schemes. Ratzinger's family, particularly his father, held deep resentment toward the Nazis, and his father's outspoken opposition led to demotions and harassment for the whole family. After Ratzinger turned 14 in 1941, he was conscripted into the Hitler Youth, as membership had become mandatory for all German boys of that age in March 1939. However, according to his brother, Ratzinger was far from enthusiastic about it and even refused to attend the meetings. There are stories that the future pope also helped a Jewish boy with Down syndrome. So, if he was pictured near concentration camps, it was a mere chance. Eventually, the Allied denazification cleared him, dismissing any anti-Semitic ties, but the controversy remains a talking point. After all, there were a large number of Catholic clergy who had enthusiastically participated in Hitler's mission. There's a rumor that the Vatican keeps the record of those individuals who were close to it, but of course, their names would never be released to the public. Number 6. The Duplessis orphans tragedy. The financial scandals of the Vatican are never-ending. Between 1935 and 1964, thousands of orphan children were left behind, sometimes because they were born out of wedlock or placed in the care of the state by a parent or family member. These children were brought up in facilities like nurseries, orphanages, and even psychiatric hospitals, many of which were operated by Catholic congregations. Children in these programs often felt very fortunate. Under the Church, no harm would be done to them. Or that's what they thought. One day, those children were forced to act insane for the doctors who were allegedly doing routine checkups on them. Turns out, Quebec's Premier Maurice Duplessis, with backing from the Catholic Church, reclassified thousands of orphans as mentally ill, all for extra government funds. The horrific result? Over 20,000 kids faced unnecessary lobotomies, shock therapies, and other cruel treatments. Known as the Duplessis orphans, these children suffered lasting trauma. Children in these institutions received only minimal care, often facing strict, punishing discipline. Some were neglected, mistreated, or even abused. Many suffered severe physical violence at the hands of religious staff or guardians, who sometimes wielded leather straps or wooden rods as tools of punishment. Once out of the institution, these children found it very hard to fit into the mundane world. So, they disappeared for 20 years. Their story came back into the spotlight in 1991 when Pauline Gill published Les Enfants de Duplessis. This book opened the door for many more stories and personal accounts of the children, exposing the immense greed of the Vatican. Eventually, they fought for and won a settlement from Quebec, though the Church has yet to formally apologize. Number 5. Secret children of priests. Imagine being forced into a life without a supporting or loving father around, especially when he is alive and well. More shockingly, the father in question is someone you meet every Sunday in church or outside, yet you never know about the special connection you have with them. Must be hard, right? That's the story of thousands of secret children of priests who don't get acknowledged by their own fathers. Abandoned and neglected, these children speak of the layers of secrecy and scandal in the Vatican. For centuries, Catholic priests could marry and have children, but the Church enforced a celibacy rule in the 12th century. For years, the Vatican kept its position on the matter very ambiguous. Yet there was one thing quite clear: the priests were not getting punished for their transgressions. Apparently, all popes have known about their clergy fathering children in secrecy, and at times, even directed them funds for their expenses and education. Yet those records were never made official. As per the canon lawyers, there's no law approved by the Vatican that dissolves the priesthood of individuals who indulge in such behaviors. However, the Church had made its own guidelines for such priests, yet chose to keep them hidden from the public, until a 2019 leak showed it all. The same year, the Vatican acknowledged for the first time that it had secret guidelines for priests who broke their celibacy vows and fathered children. However, it chose not to disclose these guidelines, calling it an internal matter. Alessandro Gisotti, a Vatican spokesman, explained to the New York Times that the fundamental principle of the 2017 document was focused on the protection of the child. The document advised that any cleric who fathered a child should leave the priesthood to assume his responsibilities as a parent by devoting himself exclusively to the child. Even then, priests feared backlash. Admitting to a sin of that degree meant that they'd lose all credibility in front of the Vatican as well as their people. So, they never admitted to any wrongdoing, leaving their children all alone. Number 4. The not-so-holy popes. Popes are typically viewed as paragons of virtue, but a few have earned infamy instead. Take John XII, who led from 955 to 964 and was notorious for his violent, immoral acts, including gambling and murder. He was just around 18 years old when he took up the papal mantle, and if you trust the stories, he ran the church like a power-drunk teenager with zero restraint. By most accounts, his papal palace was basically a mix of a wild frat house and a shady brothel. Anything but holy. Whichever version you go with, one thing's certain: John didn't live a life of celibacy. In fact, legend says he met his end in the middle of a scandalous moment, suffering a stroke while with someone else's wife. However, at least, he was a problem that went away rather relatively quickly. This wasn't the case for Pope Benedict IX. A demon from hell, and so vile, so foul, so execrable that I shudder to think of it. Those are just a few of the colorful descriptions that saints and other popes have used to talk about Pope Benedict IX. This pope held the office 3 separate times, almost like a relentless virus the church just couldn't shake. His first round as pope ended when he was forced to flee Rome after citizens rose up in revolt over his violent antics. He returned for a second try, only to sell the papacy to his godfather, who then became Pope Gregory VI. an act that was, frankly speaking, atrocious. But even that wasn't the end of him. A few years later, Benedict IX returned yet again, took back his position, and ultimately German armies finally drove him out of Rome. Then there's Pope Stephen VI, who had his predecessor's corpse exhumed and put on trial in a bizarre spectacle that led to his own brutal demise. Pope Stephen was far from friendly with his predecessor, Pope Formosus. In fact, not chummy is putting it lightly. By the time Stephen took power, Formosus had been dead for months. But for Stephen, even his rival's death wasn't enough. He ordered that Formosus's decaying body be dug up, dressed in papal robes, and seated on the throne for a posthumous trial. The verdict was as grim as expected. Formosus was found guilty. Stephen then ordered his body to be dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber River. Though Stephen won this infamous cadaver trial, his victory was short-lived. He was strangled to death by an enemy just over a year later. Number 3. The story of Pope Joan. Legend has it that a woman named Pope Joan somehow disguised herself as a man and became pope during the 9th century. Most versions of her story paint her as a gifted and educated woman who disguised herself as a man, often driven by a lover's influence. According to the most popular accounts, her talents allowed her to climb the ranks within the church until she was elected pope. Her secret was dramatically exposed when she gave birth during a public procession, after which she died, either by murder or natural causes, depending on the tale. There is a version of the story that says that when the crowd got to know her secret, she was tied to her horse and dragged, which led to her demise. Following this shocking event, it's said that church processions avoided that spot, the Vatican erased her name from official records, and a ritual was introduced to ensure that only men could become pope. While historians largely dismiss this as a myth cooked up by church critics, citing it as a hyperbolic version of a more realistic story. One version of the age-old story offers a different ending for the female pope. Rather than dying right after her exposure, she was imprisoned and deposed. Afterward, she spent many years doing penance. Eventually, her son from the affair became the Bishop of Ostia, and when she passed away, he ordered her burial in his cathedral. Number 2. Sexual abuse scandals. For decades, sexual abuse scandals have rocked the Catholic Church. The first whispers emerged in the United States during the mid-1980s, and soon after, similar allegations came out of Ireland and Austria. Persistent investigative reporting uncovered systematic abuse across multiple countries, leading to a series of financial settlements for victims between 2000 and 2010. In 2019, Pope Francis pledged to hold abusers accountable, but he's yet to deliver on his promises. According to several reports so far, the Vatican has spent more than $4 billion on covering up their crimes. The money reportedly went to covering lawsuits, attorney fees, and funding the new lives of the accused. Has the Vatican ever shown any official paper trail for how it utilizes the donations it gets every year? Well, nope. Number 1. The crime capital of the world. Believe it or not, Vatican City holds one of the highest crime rates per capita worldwide. Why? Millions of tourists pour into this tiny city-state every year, and with minimal law enforcement and no prison, pickpocketing and petty theft run rampant. Italy has an agreement with the Vatican to handle prosecutions, showing how complicated keeping order can be in the world's smallest sovereign state. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.